At Connections in Mind, we're always delighted when we find other professionals who are just as dedicated to helping people build strong executive functions as we are. In a moment, I'm going to share with you an interview I did with Phil Anderton from ADHD 360. Phil used to be a policeman, but more recently he's dedicated his life to working to help people with ADHD. And I can't wait to share his passion and his vision with you. Enjoy. Start off by asking you about your work with ADHD. So you've been working in the field of ADHD for a number of years now, but I'm really intrigued. How did you get into this work?
Possibly one of the most diverse entry points into the world of ADHD that you'll ever hear of, isn't it? So there I am as a senior police officer, sat at police headquarters when my chief constable, who is the CEO of the police force, walks in and just basically throws the gauntlet down in front of me and says, there are too many young people coming into the criminal justice system. It's now your portfolio. Reduce the amount of young people in crime, please, Phil. And out he went, basically, rolled the grenade and walked away and watched it explode as he left. And an incredibly charismatic man. He went on to be the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. And he was that kind of guy. Had ideas, but then didn't know really, it wasn't his job to make them happen. And I got the job. So I had a small team. Long story short, one of them, Steve Brown, a very, very close friend of mine, he came back and he said, there's this whole mental health thing that the police are missing. The police deal with people who are at risk of harming themselves or others, but we don't deal with mental health disorders at the opposite end of the scale. And there's this thing in there called ADHD. And because it's incredibly hereditary, Steve's view was that this ADHD thing could be part of what's behind our problem families, behind those people coming into criminal behaviour, and we should have a look at it. And we did. We spent 6 months in the evenings researching ADHD, looking at the possible links to crime, and that was the start of the career, really. I'm going back 18 years or so now. The years have all rolled on. And we wrote to, and you and I talk about a lot, we talk about people like Russell Barkley and people like that. And we wrote a letter, like actual paper. A tree fell to start this career of mine. And wrote to Russ and said, look, we're two cops in Lancashire, that's all we are. You're an expert, but we think there's a link between this thing called ADHD and crime. Are we right? If we're right, can you help? If we're wrong, just tell us to shut up. And he picked up the phone and rang me at police headquarters and said, yeah, you're right. You're the only cops in the world that are thinking this way, but there are links. How can I help? And to this very day, Russ has been a help with that. So that's how I got into it. Long answer that, sorry, but an unusual route.
Yeah, it paints an amazing picture, and I think that lots of people will be able to identify with that. So thanks so much for sharing. You're clearly passionate about helping people with ADHD, and we've had lots of conversations over the last year or so since we met about it. But I'm interested to hear more about your organisation, ADHD, and how you, ADHD 360, and how you work with people with ADHD through that portal.
I think, okay, so the interesting part, without getting over commercialised in terms of what is ADHD 360 about, is that, of course, in those days of being a police officer, if I segue this for you, I was saying that these people that aren't in the health system, that are now in the justice system because they're not getting treatment, they should be in the health system. The NHS should be providing better care, better treatment more expeditiously than a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year waiting list. And in those 5 years, if somebody goes into drugs, theft, robbery, violence, emotional dysregulation that causes them to do any of those things, I used to argue that was wrong, and the place for these people would be in the health system, not in the justice system. And I built a career arguing that, if I'm honest. I wrote books, wrote papers, travelled the Northern Hemisphere, training cops, training court officials and people. And then life rolls on. I leave the police. I forge a new career working for Mott McDonald's and PricewaterhouseCoopers as a management consultant. And everything was going really, really well. And I eventually got the consultancy back into health work. So I started to do a management consultancy, change management in the health system. I then managed to leverage that into working in ADHD clinics to try and improve these waiting lists, because it was okay as a cop saying the NHS had got to do more. But actually the realisation as the debate matured was, I'm not sure the NHS is capable of doing more with the way they think and the resources they've got. So there was I, given the golden ticket to go into the NHS and improve their systems and processes so they can see more patients. So that was kind of me answering my own questions I was raising 10, 15 years ago. And I find it quite difficult to do, if I'm honest. The NHS has some very entrenched ways of doing things, and I felt I was paddling the Titanic with a single wooden oar, and I couldn't even alter its pathway. It was going to hit the iceberg no matter what I was doing. And I found that, if I'm honest, I found that a little bit frustrating, that whether it was systems, processes, people, culture, attitude, lack of competence, lack of awareness, there was always a cauldron of reasons why we couldn't improve the NHS systems. So I approached two clinicians who I trusted, who I admired, and I said, look, I've tried it from a cop's perspective. I've now tried it from inside the NHS. And I know I'm not achieving what I want to achieve in life, and that is to get people well with their ADHD. Let's do it. Let's form a company. Let's form a healthcare company. Let's deliver this properly. And let's see if it can be done and if we're the people to do it. And that's how ADHD 360 came about. And some of my old colleagues and friends, they look at me and say, wow, you've got your own healthcare company. That's amazing. Have you still got your Aston Martin? No. You're still going on foreign holidays around the world. Are you kidding me? It's not one of those things where I'm ever going to buy another Aston Martin on the back of it, because we're trying to provide this healthcare at a reasonable cost for people. Because ultimately, go back all those years, I wanted to keep people out of prison, and a lot of the people that are taking drugs, dysregulated emotionally, and who are on that pathway, can't pay Ferrari prices for their healthcare. So we've deliberately set, Jen, Lisa and I have deliberately set a pathway of affordable healthcare. And I think that's really important. If ADHD 360 stands for nothing else, we stand for quality and affordable healthcare. And the reason I mention that, it's not a sales pitch. It's going all the way back to what I was trying to achieve as a cop. Lisa, in clinics in Sheffield, setting up clinics and not being able to provide the medicine she wanted to, she moved out of the NHS into pharmaceutical research for ADHD because she couldn't achieve what she wanted where she was. A timely intervention by your phone. And then,
sorry about that.
Yeah, I couldn't just let that go, but I won't. And Jen, who set up children's services and set up adult services, and was actually still finding the NHS a frustration because they were decommissioning services as opposed to increasing the investment and the resources. And now here we are, delivering those services with 600 odd patients, a couple of NHS contracts, and some of our patients pay £13.53 a week to have quality care for their ADHD. And I'm really proud of that. If my mum was watching this, I'd want my mum to be proud that her eldest is now in a position to provide healthcare for £13.53 for people. And frankly, just about everybody can afford £13 a week. And that means it's really accessible. We've broken down the barriers, we've challenged the norms, we've come in as a disruptor to the way things are done. And that's really cheesed some people off. Well, I don't care. We've got 660 patients whose lives we've changed. And for every patient that we've changed the life of, we've changed mum and dad's life, or their children's life, or their grandparents, or their grandchildren. And I don't care about anything else other than that. I think that's really important. And that's how we got to where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So just try and sum up for me, if you can, like, what would success look like? What would be the ultimate dream outcome for you of this work that you're doing right now?
Wow, that's a big question. I think a couple of facets to sum that up. One would be that the NHS actually starts to look at itself and changes the way it does things so it can become more responsive. If this can be done in the private sector, it can be done in the public sector. And it's about, can the disruptor make that change? Well, who knows? We have a couple of NHS contracts I'd like more, not because they're financially lucrative, but because we can then change the way things are done. And I think that's really important. And I think on the other answer to the question is, what would success look like? And that happens on a daily basis, but I want it to continue for the rest of my working career, if not beyond. And that is when patients contact us and say, you've changed my life. I don't think there's a better job.
No.
You know, I've rolled around in the gutters and locked people up. I've chased people in big, fast police cars. I've police protests. I've helped people at times of death and all those kind of things. But I've never had a rewarding job like this, where when somebody just says, do you know what, Phil, you and your nurses, you've changed my life. I just think, yeah, that's great. That's what success really looks like, is patients' success.
It's so great. And we really share that kind of passion for helping people with these challenges. And that's really how we found each other, really. And how I think we met up at a pub up in Lincolnshire somewhere, wasn't it? A year or so ago. And we got talking about this. But most people that are watching this now won't have heard of this term executive functioning, which is how we got to know each other. So they will have heard of ADHD, but not executive function. So can you tell us a bit more about your understanding of executive functions, just to give them a bit of a clearer picture?
And there's a bit of a story here as well. And when I first started in all of this, I went to an international conference based in America. It was in Denver, in Colorado. It's brilliant. For a young police or middle-aged police officer to be sponsored to go to Denver for a week, it was like, wow, all my dreams come true. But at this conference was a guy called Tom Brown. And Tom is a legend in the world of ADHD, and he focuses a lot on executive functioning, and he talks very lyrically about EF and what it means. And his simple expression that he used, which I've never forgotten, is that the part of the brain that controls executive functioning is effectively the conductor of the orchestra. And every instrument may be playing the music perfectly, and maybe every instrument may be in tune at the right tempo. But if it's not all playing it the way that the conductor wants it all to be played, it's going to sound like a cacophony, and it's not going to sound like the beautifully orchestrated piece of work that it actually is. And ergo, there's the prefrontal cortex, the conductor of cortex, the conductor of the rest of the brain, and we're either in tune, in sync, or we're not, and it's chaotic. And then that, to me, nailed executive functioning in a kind of, what can you put on the back of a beer mat? Well, that's executive functioning. And there's always a counter argument with some people, but for me, that's the definition of ADHD, really. If your orchestra's got all the right instruments, all the right notes, they're all in tune, but they're all playing, and it comes out as chaotic cacophony, then we've got to sort that out. And by a combination of medicine and therapy, if we can get the orchestra playing a more tuneful way, then we are achieving our objective. And when when you say we met in a pub, it makes it sound like we met through Match.com. We were professionally put in touch with each other.
We were,
and decided to have a meeting over lunch, because we both travelled quite a way for that meeting. Because of that synergy between executive functioning and ADHD, and what you do at Connections in Mind and what we do at 360 has proven to be a really good offer for people to get both things in one whammy, one hit, as it were. I don't think you can discuss ADHD without discussing executive functioning. You might not label it that. You might label it as emotional dysregulation, or my inability to boil a kettle properly, or my inability to work out where my car keys are when I'm in a rush for work. It doesn't matter how we label it and define it. What matters is that what we do and what you do, and especially what we do together, is working towards reducing the deficits that this thing called ADHD or this thing called executive functioning is impairing somebody with. And we talk quite a lot about what is this thing that we talk about, and people talk about ADHD as inattentiveness, impulsivity, hyperactivity. They're nonsense words, really. I had a mum on the phone to me yesterday in tears. This is a genuinely true story. It was so heartbreaking that my wife came, patted me on the back and made me a cup of tea whilst I was on the phone to this lady. And I was asking her to set her goals for treatment, and that's the important bit. That's the link to here. Set her goals for treatment. And she said, I've got no idea. I've got no idea at all. And I said, well, what about being more organised? She went, oh God, if I could be more organised, it would change my life. I said, what about being able to control your emotions a little bit more? She said, oh, if only. My emotions have been a letdown for me all my life. And I thought, right, take a punt, Phil, take a risk. I said, what about being a better mum? And she went, I can't even be a mum. My executive functioning is so poor, they've taken my children off me. And I don't think I'll ever get them back. So my best goal in relation to my children is to make sure their adoption goes well. And that's why we do what we do, isn't it? Because that's not about hyperactivity or inattentiveness. That's the real life of this lady who really is struggling. And I don't mind talking about that in open forum, because I think people need to understand the gravitas of what we're talking about here. This isn't about little Billy who throws the chair at the teacher and then is then expelled. There's a huge swathe of our society who are completely misunderstood. I use the expression, they're on their arse, and they're on their backside with no hope. And because for the 30 odd years of this lady's life, nobody's understood her. And we do, you and I, our organisations and all the people that work with us and connected with us, I think we do understand people in this bracket, in this bucket of life. And what I want to do is get her to a point where she can actually function. And that's all about her executive functioning.
Yeah. Such a powerful message, Phil. And, it's just, I don't think anyone watching here today would have not been affected by that. This profound impact that executive function challenges have on people's lives. And that's why we're passionate about the work that we do. And I know, meeting you in that pub in Lincolnshire, which we had set up and was a professional meeting, was such a great meeting of minds, really. We really realised that we had this shared passion to help people and to make things different. And ultimately, we talk about changing the world, and that's what we want to do to make life easier for people. There's no reason why they should have such a difficult time of life. We want to help them flourish.
Indeed, and that's the name of the game, and that's what it should say on the tin, and I think it does for us and yourself. And we trot off names, don't we? The people that we work with, the legends that go before us. What does success look like? A key question. I just hope that when we're dead and gone, people can actually look back and think, do you know what? There was that organisation, and if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here now. And wow, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
It would be incredible. It would.
I'm probably going to pop off this planet earlier than I'd planned to, because this is so damned hard. But we need a legacy. We need a footprint, and I think my footprint in the sand has got to be all about making a difference for people and working with Connections in Mind and working with Addis and other organisations. I think this is the right path for us to be on, to help those people that others have turned their back on, really.
Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that impassioned interview. It was just so insightful, and I hope that people really got to understand what's driving you forward and our organisation as well, and that shared passion and vision that we have for the future. And I encourage anyone to reach out to ADHD 360 or Connections in Mind for support if this resonated for you, your family, or people that you know.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.